So, how should we proceed? And by we, I mean us white people who are unhappy with anti whiteism. We want a path forward, and we want to accomplish something in real life other than just posting online. Well, first, let's talk about Europe. In Europe, they've been chanting Ausländer raus. Parties like the Sweden Democrats and AfD have been doing better. In Europe, what's probably best is young, enthusiastic men and women should be climbing those hierarchies. I'm talking government, media organizations, corporate environments, military, education. Maybe they could capture those institutions for us. Even if not, if we win elections, we might be able to restructure those organizations and promote our guys to run them. It gets exceedingly difficult to transition those organizations over to the good guys if there aren't some good guys already in them. And even if you put the best possible man in charge of a country, if there aren't people ready to support him spread across all those institutions, he is kind of screwed. So even if those institutions are currently captured and our guys can't accomplish a lot in them, it is good to have them there and have them ready. But how about outside of Europe? Us European diaspora, us Westmen like in the United States or Canada. Well, what I said just now is still a good idea. It's still good to have our guys in these different hierarchies. They might be able to improve things slightly, and they'll be ready to potentially support a potential leader or political party or movement if it comes along, but it is less likely to come along anytime soon. And entering and climbing those institutions, those hierarchies, is genuinely harder here. The further a country is along in its corruption, in its anti-whiteism, in its demographic replacement, aka biological white erasure, the further it is along in that process, it gets harder to enter those institutions. And one of the things that becomes more compelling and interesting is establishing competing and parallel institutions, right? And our political focus shifts more locally where we can get more done. In South Africa, for example, where that process is extremely far along, there's no recapture of those institutions. There's no retaking the government or anything like that. But Afrikaners do still need a place to live in peace and safety. Orania was created.
'n stad waar ons kinders veilig in die strate kan speel.
It's socially separated from the wider country to some extent, but also the country's infrastructure. As that fails, Orania has their own sewage works now. They maintain a landfill that's actually better than a lot of the other ones in the country, and they're pursuing energy independence, a really great thing. Now, you may have seen Asha Logos' video, A Call to Return to the Land. It resonated with a lot of people because many people somewhere deep down in the recesses of their brain, they were kind of thinking about that sort of thing. We need our own community. We need our own Orania, a place for us. And we could also benefit from other parallel institutions. I'd like to see academics developing our ideals for the modern day. We do need a media that takes the events of the day and provides our perspective on what's happening so people can make sense of the world in the same way we do. But there is one thing I want to discuss, especially with parallel communities. Some organizations won't like what we're trying to do, and they're going to try to do things about it. They're going to target the general public and local officials. They're going to try and convince those people that we're bad, and they're going to push local officials to do something about us. Even if there's no laws being broken, they're going to try to find some excuse. Building codes, zoning laws, soil erosion, protected wildlife habitats, easement enforcements, anything they can. So every project needs to decide, do you want to be invisible or visible? Because being invisible means being very small, very exclusive. You can't have any grand plans because you're always going to be tiny. You're basically really looking at a few friends on a random piece of land. That's not really a parallel community. If you're visible, though, you do need to engage in PR, public relations. Being visible means you can actively recruit, potentially build a much larger project that gets a lot more done for our people, and it can make us less reliant on outside systems, especially those outside systems that are very anti-white, like college admissions, right? A large enough project, a large enough community could educate people. Now, some people will say, hey, sheriffs, cops, government officials, they'll do what they're told, and they're going to crack down on you no matter what. And that's only somewhat true, okay? Don't be too black-pilled. A lot of those people, sheriffs and whatnot, they might not be our guys, but they're not wholly their guys either. They work for the system, but on some level, a lot of them just believe in the system. That's why they work for it. They believe the system protects freedom. They believe the system does not unfairly victimize people who have done nothing wrong. And if an organization like one of our projects keeps its nose clean, those officials may push back against their orders to harm us if they have some. Those orders will conflict with their view that the system is fair and just. We've seen all sorts of sheriffs and government officials refusing to comply with state and federal laws before, but they do need to believe that they're being good and righteous when they do that. So let's say we have one of our projects, a parallel community, pop up. Well, what narrative is that community going to espouse? Maybe they espouse something like, we found the increasing anti-whiteism disturbing. We found pictures of white children being shamed for their race by their parents and their schools disturbing. We found the claim that Europeans have never accomplished anything and it was all stolen from innocent non-whites to be hurtful and untrue. And when we tried to push back and we tried to argue against all these things, we were told to F off into the woods. You know, if we don't like it, then leave. So that's what we did. We're out in the woods. We're building our community. We want to live with each other. We're not pushing our ideas on anyone. We just want a space for us where we can raise our children our way. That would be an ideal narrative, in my view. When government officials come by to check on the project after all those things they've been told by those anti-whites, they don't find armories, they don't find combat training simulators, they don't find a bunch of aggressive young men, they find families and children. We're building homes, we're planting gardens, we're collecting chicken eggs. They don't find bulletproof vests, we're there in overalls, in the yard pushing our kids on tire swings. The general public and those local officials are going to have a hard time believing the claim that the project is violent and dangerous if that's what they find. They're going to feel like they're doing the right thing when they defend our rights, and they will be doing the right thing. We just need to make it as easy as possible for them to know that. Consider Randy Weaver. A lot of mainstream people thought what happened in Ruby Ridge was bad. Randy testified in front of Congress that he believes in the separation of different races. He wanted to live far away from people. He wanted a place for his family. And a lot of people who defended him and criticized what happened in Ruby Ridge felt like even if they didn't agree with Randy, they could overlook those comments. But if he had tweets back in the day, and like Randy had advocated for racial war, would they still defend him? Well, probably not. Even if there was recordings of Randy making aggressive racial slurs, it would have tarnished him. It would have made him look aggressive and more adversarial to other groups, and it's always easier to defend someone who is more obviously innocent. So our PR for any of our projects needs to make it clear to anyone who tries to learn us that we're obviously innocent. The goal is to make our project as palatable and easily accepted as Jared Taylor is. Now, he's a real smart guy. One of the things Jared Taylor knows is if you advocate for a non-mainstream belief, especially a taboo belief, that has like a negative effect on how people see you and your relationships with other people. And if you want to successfully advocate for that taboo belief, then other than that belief, you need to be kind of normal and palatable and likable. Because if you have like a bunch of taboo beliefs and you're pushing them all at once, people don't feel like they can defend you anymore.
My view has been that one can't afford to be a crank on more than one subject at a time.
Our projects, if we want those projects to be a success, can only be a crank on one issue. So our projects need to keep their noses clean. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that, in my mind, is adopting language that is inwardly focused on the group. You know, we're not doing what we're doing because of some hatred for some outside group or because we want to harm them. We're doing what we're doing out of appreciation for our group. We want a space for our people to flourish. We have love for our kin. And the way we're perceived matters a lot for recruitments. Forming communities is absolutely a ton of work. It's very hard and requires a lifetime of effort from committed individuals. You do not want to chase away good people with obnoxious rhetoric or violent memes. How many people do you know are willing to completely refocus their lives and their families on a project? Look at Orania. They've gotten thousands of people, but it's taken them decades to do it. And Orania, if you have a criminal record, you can't get in. If you aren't participating in the betterment of the community, you're not welcome in Orania. Orania is for people who are ready to work, not just show up and enjoy a relaxing life that other people have made for you. There they've said multiple times that people have had trouble adjusting or even leaving Orania because of how hard the work is there. And you need people like that if you're going to lead any successful project here that can compare to Orania. We need people with clean criminal records, who are very hard workers, who do not tolerate antisocial behavior, which means that a lot of them already have nice houses. A lot of them already have nice families. They live in nice communities. They work good jobs, which means they're going to be very intolerant to a lot of obnoxious things. They've heard racial revenge narratives screamed on the subway once or twice. They may know of a park near them that has had racial violence between Black and Hispanic gangs, and they have no interest in uprooting their whole life to live near people who joke about racial violence or violence against political enemies or celebrations of past violence. Why go through all that effort and uproot your life to live near someone like that? And remember, in Orania, the people who initially moved to Orania were made materially poorer when they moved there. They didn't move for money. They moved in spite of money. They moved for their ideology, which means you need to be very ideologically acceptable to potential recruits. That's very important, especially when you're talking about needing very high quality recruits.
So people left their jobs to move here. This is semi-desert. You can drive around 10 kilometers out of town. You'll see it's desert. Yeah. Very hot, very cold, very, very little rain. And people moved here with nothing. No jobs, no economy, nothing. So there was a stage in Orania's history where it was the highest qualified per square kilometer in the country. Because who moves after an idea? Intellectuals, academics, doctors, lawyers, professors. And they moved here and they started trying to develop this. And that was days of hunger and thirst. Jeez. It was not easy days, right? But you had a lot of people with a pioneer spirit and with a plan, which they very, very, they believed in it with a lot of fire in them, They said, we're going to do this, we're going to make it work.
This is why our narrative, our language needs to be highly curated. Remember, our story isn't, hey, we need to get away from that group because they're bad. Our story is, we want to be with our people because we love each other, we love our culture, we want to celebrate and express our shared heritage. This isn't about other people. We're focused on us. Our people need to be looked after, so we're going to pick up that duty of looking after each other. Many sheriffs will defend our right to live with and help the people we love. Potential recruits might be excited about living in a community that celebrates love or shared heritage. They might be willing to make that big move take that financial hit if it's for something they cannot get anywhere else. But a negative vision of other people bad or some sort of dislike for others, that's everywhere for free. Any project that we want to be successful, I believe, should adopt a view that the project has no racial or ethnic enemies. There is no race or ethne that is a problem. There is no race or ethne that needs to be solved. The project might have ideological enemies. Anti-whites are ideological enemies. They advocate for harm to white people. They try to get our rights taken away. But that's not synonymous with any particular race or ethne. Now, I'm sure someone's sending me a message. Come on, are you saying we have no racial enemies that we don't need to talk about, Embargo? To you, I would say there are some communities that have a lot of anti-whiteism in them. They struggle with their level of hatred for white people. When I say that whites have no racial enemies and that our projects have no racial enemies, that doesn't change the fact that some of these groups really need to get their anti-whiteism under control, and that members of those groups are more likely to harm us and advocate for anti-whiteism. But, you know, remember, some anti-whites are white, and you cannot be blind to them because they still will try and hurt you. And you might say to me, gosh, embargo, you know, all this stuff, it seems so nitpicky. You're talking about PR, language policing, narrative framing. Does this all really matter? And I'd say, oh yeah, it definitely matters. The way people talk and the way they think is like connected. If you say something enough, you're going to believe it. And if you think something enough, you're going to come out and say it one way or another. And the exact same project, from a material perspective, right? The same piece of land, the same buildings might succeed or fail based off of the narrative they establish. Because remember, people aren't moving there for the material things. They're moving there for the ideological language narrative things. The words you speak are more important than the buildings. Do you think you can recruit some nice, white, peaceful families without a narrative that isn't also nice, white, and peaceful? Some narratives, some language, some individual words are more easily twisted by the media. Lexicography, rhetoric, dialectics, how language and concepts interface and how they spread is absolutely critical to our projects moving forward. And just to sort of give you an example, there's this interview with two women in Orania. They were asked why they wanted to live there.
What attracted you to Orania?
I want to start my own business. So.
And this is the place to do it. Yes. With only 1,600 residents?
You know, that's so funny. Are you sure there isn't other reasons? Just economic opportunity? Come on, you can tell me. Why else?
What interested you about Orania? And you saw it fit to come back here some 2 years ago after being out of this community for about 7 years. What brings you back here?
Yeah, as you said, I grew up here, and I think Orania really grows on you.
Why? Because you actually even found a job after qualifying as a chartered accountant.
Yes. So
but why did you leave all that behind?
Because I really want to be here.
You actually got an internship at PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the established auditing firms in South Africa. Why the choice to come back here? Was it the lack of job opportunities that brought you back here, or you genuinely want to come and live here?
I had a few job offers, and I decided that I want to be here, except for the fact that I want to work start our own business. I really enjoy it in Orania. I like to be here and be part of everything that we do here. As I said, we have a positive energy here, and it's nice to be part of it. We are not negative every day.
He really wanted them to like drop the inward focus. He wanted them to stop focusing on themselves, stop focusing on the group, the positive future for the community. He wanted them to take an outward negative focus. Come on, ladies, don't just tell me you're innocent, nice white women building a positive future. Tell me you're here to get away from blacks. Tell me you're here because black people are bad or something about them is bad. That's all I need. We'll play that clip of you saying blacks are bad for weeks or months on the news. This is why all media contact needs to be controlled in our future projects. I mean, corporations do it, right? Employee handbook at Facebook or Microsoft will tell you, hey, if the media comes around to ask you a question, don't answer them. You need to put them in contact with the media department, right? You do not want a random engineer telling the entire world that they blame a particular department for an outage, right? Or you don't want them saying something that'll harm the whole company. Similarly, you want the media in our projects handed off to a media team, and your media team might not agree to interface with a particular media until there's been a signed contract saying what can and can't be filmed, what they can and can't edit, what they can or can't release, if there needs to be approvals before they release things. This all needs to be curated and selected. projects should instruct their members to direct all media to the right person. And for us, the media is not on our side. The media is largely hostile to our existence. We should probably do like nothing with them, especially if we know that they're going to edit or malign us. We should only be doing things if we can get them to sign contracts that ensure we get the kind of coverage we want. Otherwise, any media should be our own, right? Should be our own videos, our own pictures, our own online posts that support our narrative. So that way, when someone in the general public or the local official hears about how bad we are, and they hear about how focused we are on our hatred for some other group, they can't find that when they look at us. They can't find street interviews or Twitter posts of us calling other races bad or less human or anything like that. Everything they see in our message, our narrative, everything they hear spoken in our voices contradicts the lies they've heard about us. Now, the people of Orania are really smart. I want the best for them. That being said, they're not perfect. One of the important narratives that we have as white people that we need to dismantle over time is the narrative that like white people introduced racism to the world, that we like ruined the world, that it was all getting along before we came along and we messed it up. This is an original sin religious narrative. It's anti-white, it's inaccurate, and we're going to need to combat it. And we cannot adopt language that enforces it, and we always have to adopt language that fights against it. Now, I hope you can agree with me that narrative of like white people as the spoilers of the world is bad, and we need to fight against it. Well, let's take a look at this interview with Mr. Bosheff, I think his name is, one of the leaders of Orania movement in the past.
It's a white town. There's a lot of black towns as well.
In this interview, he points out that Orania is a white town, but there's lots of black towns too. Great. So we're creating a narrative where white people are humans. We deserve the same rights as others. And then he goes on to say this.
But of course, one of the problems in South Africa is we don't only have old racism, we have new racism as well.
Okay.
Which feeds the animal.
New racism being black people hating white people?
Yes.
Old racism? What? Old racism? When you use terms like old racism versus new racism, or here in the United States, if you say racism and reverse racism, you know what you're doing? You're basically saying real racism and fake racism. You're playing into an original sin narrative where white people are the real cause of the problem, and the new racism or reverse racism is just white people getting what's coming to them, right? After all those terrible things, here's white people getting their comeuppance. That is the narrative that you are reinforcing when you use those types of terms. I slapped my forehead when he said that. You cannot use their terms. You never use terms that specifically lead people down a conceptual path that demonizes your race. The main point of this video, I believe people are itching to start or be part of these kinds of projects. And if these projects are serious about their goals, they need to curate and control the founding concepts, the language, and all publicly available communications of all of the members. Embargo, you're telling me we need to be so disciplined, we need to never allow racial slurs, references to violent offense, portraying other groups as the problem? But other groups don't need to be so disciplined. The media pays no attention at all to black nationalists who openly talk about needing violence against whites. They basically pretend like those groups don't exist, unless they're celebrating them. And you know what? You're right. It's not fair. But I still believe what I'm telling you. If someone in our project jokes about violence about some other group or political opponent, and they add in Roblox or in Minecraft, the correct action is to take them aside and explain to them how their behavior isn't acceptable, how that type of rhetoric can get you arrested and has gotten people arrested, and how it tarnishes the project. When some NGO meets with the county government to talk about the project, they'll have a PowerPoint of screenshots with people saying stuff like that. And people should only get one warning, right? Delete the offending comment, warn them, and if they continue that kind of behavior, they either don't understand how serious the consequences are, which means they're sort of dangerous to have around, or they actively want those consequences to befall the group and the project. So they want to hurt us. The anti-whites are in power, all right? If you're serious, you can deal with that fact, understand the fact that it's not fair, and simply adopt the strategy that's most likely to move us forward. to build success. What we tweet, what we post on Telegrams, our videos, it all needs some filtering and curation. We have a very small amount of control over the narrative because we don't control the media. We need to at least use the small things we have. Our own channels, our own timelines, our websites might be the only place in the world that we can dispel the myths that we're hateful and violent. It might be the only place to demonstrate our grace, our humility, our commitment to our people and our ancestors, how to showcase how peaceful we live our lives. So we cannot squander that because someone enjoys posting racial slurs and edgy Tarantino-esque humor, right? The moment our best hardworking people join some group chat on Twitter to learn about us and someone hits them with thoughtless memes, it chases them away. Why would they move their wife and children to live with people who post that, and they're going to take an economic hit to do it? I believe the project that treats narrative, language, and media as top priorities are going to have a lot more success with recruitment of the highest quality people and will be the most resilient to pressure from the outside. And that's what I'm hoping for, because I want these projects to be successful. And of course, if you're looking around and shopping some of these projects, if people are talking about doing this or that, take a look. What are they posting? What are they allowing to be posting? When someone comes in and posts something bad, are they dealt with? Or do people just sort of shuffle their feet and go, haha, they're so crazy, and allow it to happen? This needs to be nipped in the bud. If you want to join one of these projects, you need to be Jared Taylor.
My view has been that one can't afford to be a crank on more than one subject at a time.
You need to look at the leaders, and guess what? They need to be Jared Taylor. We're all Jared Taylor here now because we can all afford to only be cranks on one issue.